speed paint. So this time I've decided that instead of making the footage 10 times as quickly and making it impossible for you to see anything I'm doing, I'm just going to maybe make the speed paint a little longer, but at least you get to see what I'm doing and you don't get horrible motion sickness. So today I decided I was going to draw Tom Nook from Animal Crossing fame because I wanted to draw something for a furry convention that's got a video game theme this year, and this is meant to be something that can be put in front of the dealer's den, you know, like a little banner thing. And I figured, you know, furries plus video games plus money equals Tom Nook. So here we are. I decided to draw him closer to what an actual tanuki or raccoon dog looks like, hence why he's very fluffy. Raccoon dogs are mad fluffy. So the cool thing about speed paints this time is that I decided that I wanted to show everybody how I start and finish something. Although I usually sketch on paper, this time I decided to do it digitally. So the sketch was pretty quick and easy. So we're moving along to the line art now. I use the Onta brush pack, in case you're curious. It costs $5, but it comes with a lot of cool stuff, and honestly the best inking pens I've ever used. And I use a high stabilizer on Sai, because my hands are not that good. I can't do these types of lines as neatly if I don't have some computer assisted help. If at any time you see stuttering, or like a little pause, it's because I'm checking references. Don't be like me, right? Don't be like me and don't check your references. For example, that bell bag is wrong. The symbol for that is a star, not a leaf, but you know, I didn't pay enough attention. I thought I knew what I was doing. Here you see me fighting with a hand. When aren't we fighting with hands? Am I right? DAE, fellow artists? But you know, with a little bit of trickery, you can fit it in. The whole point was to give him like an air of inviting you into the dealer's den and come and spend your money, since that's what he's so good at. A cool thing about Tom Nook being so fluffy is that you can just detail those lines as much as you want. Here you're about to see me fighting with this foot. Feet in general, animal feet in particular, tricky from the front view. I'm deciding what his feet should probably look like until I realized that I already did a base for something that could work. And there I finally figured out, since he is plantigrade, or flat-footed, he shouldn't be, you know, standing with his toes. So just little toes facing forward. And that big fluffy tail. Ah, such a pleasure when you get to like draw characters with massive tails. So this is the line art, more or less. There's some tweaking. I made an effort to not zoom as much this time around because I didn't know how much I wanted you know, the footage to be sped up, and I didn't want people to just lose their minds if the footage was too sped up and I was zooming in and out, and that was terrible. I don't want to talk about that. So here we move straight to flat colors. The line for the tail was not closed, so everything went brown for a second, and same here. I went too far. Always try to have your lines closed if you're going to use the bucket tool fill. In order to use the bucket tool fill, which is a great tool to save you hours of your life, you have to have the transparency set to strict. And you also have to make sure that you go around the line art and color all the little pixels that remain uncolored. I hate it, especially in situations where I do a lot of spikes, because it's always at the end of those little spikes you have to go and fill with your color of choice. A cool thing that I discovered semi recently, if you can believe it, is the clipping group in Sai. What the clipping group does is that it just works with whatever you have underneath only. So you choose a color and then you add a clipping group to it, and it will only work on that color. Anything you do will just be on that one layer or on that one color that you chose. So it's really cool for when you have characters with complex markings and such, you know, in order to detail those and erase them. There I did the eyes. I wanted him to be looking straight at you, so you could feel intimidated and spend your money. And here's when I realized my bell bag was wrong, and I spent 10 minutes trying to draw a star, because I am a good artist. But there, sorted. That's Tom Nook's flats done. So now we're gonna do the grass. I really like coloring grass, right? Because a lot of people just stick to green and leave it as is, but there's so much nuance to how you can put shades of green. You can use bluer greens, you can use yellower greens. I love yellow green, personally. You can see it because I just use it all the time. And I also love in Animal Crossing the little triangle sort of texture grass has, so I decided to go for that too, to complete the look. And you know, make it more complex where he's standing. Nothing like a nice clear sky in the background, beautiful blue. Fun fact, the sky is lighter at the horizon and darker at like the zenith. So if you ever want to make your skies look a little bit nicer, just that. Here I decided to add some components in the background because I was looking at a little barren, and I decided to add some trees. Animal Crossing uses this sort of turquoise or teal that's very appealing for their pine trees, and I decided that was a great complementary color because it's midway between the blue of the sky and the green of the grass. So we're moving on to shading. I decided that I want to do cell shaded for this. Cell shading is really interesting because it involves sort of very hard shadows. First you have to decide where the light is coming from, and I decided it's coming straight on because I kind of shaded the grass that way previously, like I painted it lighter. So I reckon, you know, if the light is coming straight forward, it would look nicer, look congruent with the rest of the piece. So here I am going, making all the little fur tufts. Fur tufts are mad fun to draw, and the final effect that you get is very pleasing. It's very fluffy. I just want to accentuate just how fluffy this Tanuki is. Look at that neck fluff. Cell shading can be quite time consuming, especially if you're doing details like this, but it's ultimately easier in an extent than having to do softer shading or painterly sort of shading because it's only one color. It's sort of like an illusion of shadow, very hard illusion of shadow rather than actual going in and trying to do all the volume in a more subtle way. This way it's very easy even to do all these details in a more realistic, more painterly way. I'd probably be suffering trying to shade like individual tufts of hair. At least I do. I'm not a very painterly type of person. When shading, you can use any colors you want. I decided to go for red, mostly because I had a conversation with another artist friend recently who has a gorgeous cell shading style, and I asked her, how do you do it? How do you do it? And she said, oh, you should shade with a a red to purple. Anything there will give a vibrancy to your picture. And I thought, hey, why not try it here? Also, it makes sense in the color scheme of Tumnuk. Tumnuk is very brown, it's very golden, very reddish, so having a red shade to use it on him would be probably a good idea. It would look nice. I think it looks quite good. The only bad thing about clipping groups is that sometimes if you shade, you do cell shading without clipping groups, you could be able to bucket fill your shading zones. You know how I make those little lines before, you know, I draw the lines and then I start filling them in. Usually, if you weren't using a clipping group, you could bucket fill all of those and they would also be extremely fast. But because use a clipping group, if you use the bucket fill, it's just going to fill the entire layer, and it's not worth it. Here I'm shading all of the hair in that tail. Look at that. Don't you want to hug it? I want to hug it. I think Tanukis don't actually have tails that long. I might have gone a little overboard, but listen. Once you get the chance to just draw some fur, wouldn't you? Here I'm deciding what I'm doing with the shading of the grass, but I realized that doing cell shading on the grass, because the grass has those triangles on it already, it would just add to the busyness of the picture and not really give you a proper sense of shading, of depth. It's just more busying things for your eyes. And entering sort of the last bit, it's the highlights. So highlights, or as a friend of mine calls it, the happy lines, basically help add more light to your picture. It helps sometimes add more color complexity, and can help add volume as well. You know, usually you want to use highlights on places where the light is getting caught, usually on round areas, on angles. Some people like to use them very excessively, like I'm doing here, because they just look really good. You also usually want to put highlights where the light is meant to hit, but there's also this thing called backlight, which, don't ask me how it works, I'm still figuring it out, but it makes it look cool if you add some highlights onto the shadowed areas. Here I'm coloring the line art. Coloring the line art's pretty cool for this sort of cell shaded art, because it helps meld your colors together. I usually take a shade from one of the darkest areas of shading and then turn it a little bit darker. And that's what I use for my line art. And here I'm adding the finishing touches. I'm gonna use an overlay layer, which what it does, it adds light, like a light coloring to your piece. You can change like sort of the way like the color hue with overlay, and it's really nice. I love it. It adds so much depth if you add a little bit of overlay. And this is about it. It's just me mucking around with the end, and that's it. That's Tom Nook. Thanks for watching.